What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected legends comes face to face with a talk show host who thinks he can say whatever he wants? It only took one comment, just 36 seconds into what should have been a friendly conversation, for everything to explode in the most shocking way possible. Before we get into this, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because we're pulling back the curtain on Hollywood's dark side, exposing entitled celebrities and their shocking behavior the cameras never showed you. We've got the raw footage they don't want you to see, and you won't want to miss a single reveal. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think about this outrageous behavior. So let's get into exactly what went down that night. The studio audience is buzzing with excitement. The lights are bright, the cameras are rolling, and everyone is waiting for Harrison Ford to walk out onto that stage. This is supposed to be a celebration. Harrison is there to promote his latest project, something he's poured his heart and soul into. The crowd erupts in applause as he makes his entrance, waving to the fans who have supported him for decades. Stephen Colbert stands up from behind his desk, that familiar grin plastered across his face. They shake hands, and Harrison takes his seat. The audience settles down, expecting the usual banter, the usual laughs, the usual respectful interview that Harrison has done 1,000 times before. But that's not what they're about to get. Stephen leans back in his chair, looking casual, looking confident. He's got his notes in front of him, but there's something in his eyes, something cocky, something that suggests he thinks this is his show, his stage, and his rules. "Harrison Ford, everybody," Stephen says, and the crowd claps again. "Thanks for being here, really appreciate it." Harrison nods, polite as always. "Thanks for having me." "So," Stephen starts, and there's already an edge in his voice. "You're here to talk about your new film, but I gotta say, I'm more interested in talking about something else." Harrison's expression doesn't change, but you can see it. That slight shift in his posture. That tiny moment where he's wondering where this is going. "Oh yeah? What's that?" Stephen grins wider. "I want to talk about how you've been doing the same character for 40 years now? I mean, come on, Han Solo, Indiana Jones, it's all the same guy, right? Grumpy old dude with a jacket?" The audience laughs nervously. It's a cheap shot, and everyone knows it. Harrison has played some of the most iconic characters in cinematic history, and here's Stephen, reducing it all to a punchline. Harrison shifts in his seat. "Well, I'd say they're pretty different characters, actually." "Are they, though?" Stephen interrupts, leaning forward. "I mean, let's be honest. You've been coasting on nostalgia for years. When was the last time you did something actually challenging?" The audience goes quiet. This isn't playful ribbing anymore. This is disrespectful. Harrison's jaw tightens, but he keeps his cool. He's a professional. He's been in this industry long enough to handle a host with an attitude problem. "I think if you actually watch my recent work, you'd see I've taken on a variety of roles," Harrison says calmly. "But I'm here to talk about the new film, so maybe we could focus on that." Stephen waves his hand dismissively. Sure, we'll get to that. But first, I think the audience wants to know, do you ever get tired of playing the same tough guy over and over? Do you ever look in the mirror and think, maybe I should try something different? Harrison stares at him. Just stares. You can see the frustration building behind those eyes. This is a man who has given everything to his craft, who has entertained billions of people around the world, and he's being mocked on national television by someone who thinks he's clever. "I don't think you understand what goes into creating a character," Harrison says, and his voice is measured, controlled. "Each role requires a different approach, different preparation. Just because you see a surface similarity doesn't mean the work isn't there." Stephen laughs. Actually laughs. "Oh, come on, Harrison. You're telling me there's a huge difference between Indiana Jones and Han Solo? They both shoot guns, they both have attitude problems, they both get the girl. It's the same thing, man." The audience is uncomfortable now. You can feel it. This isn't fun to watch. This is a legend being disrespected, and the host doesn't seem to care. Harrison leans forward. "You know what, Stephen? I came here to talk about my work, not to be insulted by someone who's never done what I do." Whoa, Stephen says, putting his hands up in mock surrender. "I'm just asking questions here. No need to get defensive." "I'm not defensive," Harrison replies, his voice firm. "I'm telling you that you're being disrespectful. There's a difference." Stephen smirks. "Disrespectful? I'm just having a conversation. Maybe you're too sensitive. Maybe that's why you keep playing the same characters, because you can't handle criticism." And there it is. The line has been crossed. Harrison stands up. Just stands right up from his chair. The audience gasps. Stephen's smirk falters for just a second, like he's realizing he might have pushed too far. "You know what? Harrison says, and his voice cuts through the studio like a knife. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. I've been in this business for over 50 years. I've worked with the best directors, the best actors, the best crews in the world. I don't need to prove anything to you or anyone else. Steven tries to recover. Harrison, come on, sit down. Let's just talk about the movie. No, Harrison says flatly. You had your chance to talk about the movie. Instead, you decided to insult me and my career. I'm done here. He starts to walk off the stage. The audience doesn't know what to do. Some people are clapping, supporting him. Others are sitting in stunned silence. The cameras are still rolling, capturing every second of this disaster. Steven stands up, trying to salvage the situation. Harrison, seriously, don't go. I was just joking around. Harrison stops and turns back. That's the problem, Steven. You think this is all a joke. You think you can say whatever you want because you're behind that desk. But you're wrong. You don't get to disrespect people just because you have a microphone. I wasn't trying to disrespect you, Steven says, and now he sounds defensive. I was trying to have a fun conversation. Fun? Harrison repeats, and there's disbelief in his voice. You call that fun? You insulted my work, you insulted my career, and you insulted me as a person. That's not fun, Steven. That's you being an entitled jerk who thinks he's above everyone else. The audience is fully on Harrison's side now. You can hear people murmuring in agreement. Steven's face is red. He's losing control of his own show. Look, I'm sorry if you took it the wrong way, Steven says. But it sounds hollow. It sounds like damage control, not a real apology. I didn't take it the wrong way, Harrison fires back. You said what you said, you meant it, and now you're trying to backtrack because you realize you screwed up. Steven opens his mouth to respond, but Harrison holds up a hand. Save it, Harrison says. I don't want to hear it. You know what the real problem is? You sit up here every night, making jokes at other people's expense, tearing down people who've actually accomplished something, and you think it makes you clever? You think it makes you funny, but all it does is make you small. The studio is dead silent. This is brutal. This is real. This isn't scripted. This isn't part of the show. This is one man calling out another for his behavior, and it's uncomfortable to watch. Steven tries one more time. Harrison, I really didn't mean any offense. Can we just start over? Harrison shakes his head. No, we can't start over. You showed me who you are tonight. You showed everyone watching who you are. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it didn't happen. He turns and walks toward the exit. The crew doesn't know what to do. Cameras are following him. Steven is standing behind his desk, looking lost, looking like he's just realized he made a massive mistake. Harrison, Steven calls out one last time, his voice almost pleading now. Come on, man, don't do this. Harrison stops at the edge of the stage, looks back one final time, and says, You did this, Steven. Not me. You. And then he's gone. He walks off that stage, through the backstage area, and out of the building. The audience is buzzing. People are talking over each other. Steven is left standing there, trying to figure out how to continue the show. Well, Steven says weakly, attempting a joke, that went well, but nobody laughs. The damage is done. The moment is over. And everyone watching knows that Stephen Colbert just got humbled by Harrison Ford in the most spectacular way possible. Let's break down what actually happened here. Because this isn't just about one bad interview. This is about a pattern of behavior that some talk show hosts think they can get away with. Steven came into this interview with an agenda. He didn't want to have a genuine conversation with Harrison. He wanted to make himself look smart by tearing down someone more successful than him. That's what bullies do. They pick on people to make themselves feel bigger. And Harrison saw right through it. Think about the question Steven was asking. Don't you get tired of playing the same character? That's not a real question. That's an accusation disguised as a question. He was implying that Harrison is lazy, that he hasn't grown as an actor, that his entire career is just one big repetitive act. But here's the thing. Harrison Ford is one of the most versatile actors in Hollywood. Yes, he's known for Han Solo and Indiana Jones. Those are legendary roles. But he's also done dramatic work. He's done thrillers. He's done everything. To reduce his entire career to grumpy old dude with a jacket is not just inaccurate. It's insulting. And when Harrison tried to redirect the conversation, tried to talk about what he actually came there to discuss, Steven wouldn't let him. He kept pushing, kept prodding, kept trying to get a rise out of him. That's not interviewing. That's antagonizing. And then, when Harrison finally had enough and stood up, Steven tried to play the victim. I was just joking around. Don't be so sensitive. That's what people always say when they get called out for bad behavior. They try to make it seem like the other person is overreacting, like they're the problem, not the person who started it. But Harrison wasn't having it. He saw exactly what was happening, and he refused to play along. You think you can say whatever you want because you're behind that desk. That line right there sums up the entire problem. Some talk show hosts think their position gives them the right to treat guests however they want. They think because it's their show, they make the rules, and everyone else just has to deal with it. But Harrison reminded him that respect goes both ways. Just because you have a platform doesn't mean you get to abuse it. And when Steven tried to apologize, Harrison didn't accept it because it wasn't a real apology. It was Steven trying to save face. It was him realizing the interview was falling apart and trying to fix it. Not because he felt bad, but because he looked bad. You showed me who you are tonight. That's a powerful statement. Harrison wasn't just talking about that one interview. He was talking about Steven's entire approach. He was saying, this is how you treat people. This is how you operate. And I want no part of it. Now, let's talk about what Steven said after Harrison stood up, because this is where it gets even worse. Maybe you're too sensitive. Maybe that's why you keep playing the same characters, because you can't handle criticism. Think about that for a second. Harrison is expressing his frustration at being insulted, and Steven's response is to insult him more, to call him sensitive, to suggest he's weak. That's not an accident. That's intentional. That's Steven doubling down because his ego won't let him admit he was wrong. And that's exactly why Harrison walked off, because at that moment, Harrison realized this wasn't going to get better. Steven wasn't going to suddenly become respectful. He wasn't going to change his tone. He was going to keep pushing, keep needling, keep trying to make himself look good at Harrison's expense. So Harrison made a choice. He chose his dignity over staying on that stage. He chose self-respect over playing along with a host who had no respect for him. And that takes courage. It would have been easier to just sit there, laugh it off, get through the interview, and leave. That's what most people would do. But Harrison didn't take the easy route. He stood up, literally and figuratively, and said, this is not okay. The audience reaction tells you everything you need to know. When Harrison first stood up, there was shock. But as he spoke, as he explained why he was leaving, people started clapping. They started supporting him because they recognized what was happening. They saw a man being treated poorly, and they saw him refuse to tolerate it. That's the power of standing up for yourself. And when Steven tried to stop him, tried to get him to come back, Harrison's response was perfect. You did this, Steven, not me. You. He wasn't running away. He wasn't throwing a tantrum. He was holding Steven accountable. He was making it clear that this situation existed because of Steven's choices, not his. That's leadership. That's maturity. That's knowing your worth and refusing to let someone diminish it. Now, here's the bigger picture. This isn't just about Harrison Ford and Stephen Colbert. This is about a culture in entertainment where hosts think they can get away with anything in the name of comedy or ratings. They think being edgy means being mean. They think being provocative means being disrespectful, but it doesn't. You can be funny without tearing people down. You can ask challenging questions without being insulting. You can have an entertaining interview without making your guests feel small. Harrison Ford has been doing interviews for decades. He's sat across from countless hosts. He's answered thousands of questions. And he's always been professional, always been gracious, always been respectful. But respect has to go both ways. When Steven came into that interview with the intention of making Harrison look bad, he forgot that. He forgot that the person sitting across from him is a human being with feelings, with a career he's proud of, with a legacy he's built over a lifetime of hard work. And Harrison reminded him, let's also talk about the specific things Steven said, because each one reveals something about his mindset. You've been coasting on nostalgia for years. That's not just a criticism of Harrison's recent work. That's dismissing everything he's done. It's saying, you haven't earned your success. You're just riding on past glory. That's incredibly disrespectful to someone who's still working, still creating, still contributing to the industry. When was the last time you did something actually challenging? This implies that Harrison is lazy, that he's taking the easy route, that he's not pushing himself. But anyone who knows anything about acting knows that's not true. Harrison has taken on complex, demanding roles throughout his career. To suggest otherwise is ignorant at best, malicious at worst. Maybe you should try something different. This is Steven positioning himself as an expert, as someone qualified to give career advice to Harrison Ford. Think about the arrogance of that. Steven is a talk show host. Harrison is one of the most successful actors in history. What gives Stephen the right to tell Harrison how to do his job? Every single one of these comments was designed to belittle Harrison. And when you string them all together, you see the pattern. This wasn't one bad question. This was a sustained attack disguised as an interview, and Harrison saw it for exactly what it was. When he said, "You don't get to disrespect people just because you have a microphone," he was speaking a fundamental truth. Having a platform comes with responsibility. You don't use it to tear people down. You use it to inform, to entertain, to enlighten. Stephen forgot that. Or maybe he never learned it in the first place. And the way Stephen responded when things fell apart tells you everything about his character. Instead of genuinely apologizing, instead of taking responsibility, he tried to minimize what happened. "I was just joking around." That's what people say when they don't want to admit they were wrong. But Harrison wasn't buying it. You said what you said, you meant it. He wasn't going to let Stephen rewrite history. Wasn't going to let him pretend like it was all just a misunderstanding. Because it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was exactly what it looked like. Here's something else to consider. Harrison Ford didn't have to do that interview. He's Harrison Ford. He doesn't need the publicity. He doesn't need Stephen Colbert's show to promote his work. He agreed to come on as a courtesy, as part of the normal promotional cycle, and Stephen repaid that courtesy with insults. That's what makes this even worse. Harrison showed up as a professional, ready to have a conversation, ready to share his work with the audience. And Stephen used that opportunity to try to make himself look clever at Harrison's expense. That's not just unprofessional, it's ungrateful. And when Harrison walked off, he was sending a message. He was saying, "I don't care how big your show is. I don't care how many people are watching. I won't compromise my self-respect for anyone." That's a lesson everyone should learn. The entertainment industry is full of people who think their position gives them power over others. They think because they're the host, the producer, the director, the executive, they can treat people however they want. And too often, people put up with it because they're afraid of consequences, afraid they won't get hired again, afraid they'll be labeled as difficult. But Harrison Ford is past that point in his career. He doesn't have to take that treatment. And he showed everyone watching that you don't have to either. When you know your worth, when you know what you've accomplished, when you know who you are, you don't let anyone make you feel small. And that's exactly what Harrison did. He stood up, walked off, and in doing so, he showed more strength than staying ever could have. Let's also address Stephen's attempt to play it off at the end. Well, that went well. Even after everything that happened, he tried to make a joke. He tried to act like it wasn't a big deal. But the audience's silence told a different story. Nobody was laughing. Nobody thought it was funny. They had just watched a respected legend get disrespected on live television, and they weren't okay with it. That moment of silence was louder than any applause. It was the audience saying, "We see what you did. We know what happened, and we don't approve." And that's the real consequence here. Stephen didn't just lose Harrison Ford that night. He lost the audience's respect. He showed them that he's willing to treat guests poorly for his own amusement, and people don't forget that. Your reputation is built on moments like these. How you treat people when the cameras are rolling, how you handle conflict, how you respond when you're in the wrong. And Stephen failed on all counts. He could have handled this so differently. He could have asked thoughtful questions about Harrison's career. He could have explored the craft of acting. He could have celebrated Harrison's contributions to cinema. He could have made it a memorable interview for all the right reasons. Instead, he chose to be antagonistic. He chose to be confrontational. He chose to prioritize his ego over his guest's dignity, and he paid the price. Harrison walking off that stage will be remembered far longer than any joke Stephen made. It will be the defining moment of that episode, maybe even that season. It's the moment everyone will talk about, clip, and share, but not for the reasons Stephen probably wanted. People won't remember it as the time Stephen Colbert was so edgy and bold. They'll remember it as the time he pushed too far and got put in his place by a legend who refused to be disrespected. That's his legacy from that night. And Harrison's legacy? It's strengthened. People will see this and have even more respect for him. They'll see someone who stands up for himself, who doesn't compromise his values, who knows when enough is enough. That's the difference between them. Harrison Ford has spent decades building a career based on hard work, talent, and integrity. Stephen Colbert built a show on being clever and provocative. But when those two things came into conflict, when cleverness crossed the line into cruelty, only one of them came out looking good. And it wasn't Stephen. This whole situation raises important questions about the culture of talk shows in general. Why do we accept hosts being mean to guests? Why do we think that's entertainment? Why do we reward people for making others uncomfortable? These are questions worth asking, because what happened between Harrison and Stephen isn't unique. It happens all the time in different forms. Hosts think they need to create drama to get views. They think they need to push boundaries to stay relevant. They think being provocative is the same as being interesting, but it's not. You can have compelling television without cruelty. You can have engaging interviews without insults. You can have memorable moments without making people feel bad. Harrison Ford proved that by walking off. He created a memorable moment not through what he said, but through what he wouldn't tolerate. That's powerful. That's meaningful. That's the kind of thing people remember and respect, and that's what Stephen should have learned that night. But based on his response, it's not clear that he did. When someone tells you you've crossed a line, you have two choices. You can listen, apologize genuinely, and change your behavior, or you can deflect, minimize, and continue on the same path. Stephen chose the second option, and that tells you everything you need to know about him. Harrison, on the other hand, chose dignity. He chose self-respect. He chose to walk away rather than participate in something that diminished him. That's strength. That's character. That's what a real legend looks like. Not someone who's famous for being famous. Not someone who got lucky with one big role, but someone who's built a career spanning generations, who's respected by peers and fans alike, who's earned every bit of success through dedication and craft. That's Harrison Ford. And when someone like that tells you you've crossed a line, you listen. Stephen didn't listen, and that's why he ended up standing on that stage alone, watching one of the biggest stars in Hollywood walk away from his show. That's a consequence he'll have to live with, and hopefully, it's a lesson he'll learn from. Because if he doesn't, it won't be the last time someone walks off his stage. It'll just be the first. And each time it happens, his credibility diminishes. His reputation suffers. His show becomes known not for great interviews, but for hostile confrontations. Is that really the legacy he wants? Probably not. But that's what happens when you prioritize your ego over your guest's dignity. That's what happens when you think the rules don't apply to you. That's what happens when you forget that respect is earned, not demanded. Harrison Ford taught him that lesson. The question is whether Stephen was paying attention. So what can we learn from all this? First, know your worth. Harrison knew his value, knew what he'd accomplished, knew that he didn't have to sit there and take abuse from anyone. Second, stand up for yourself. It's not easy to walk away from a situation, especially on live television, but sometimes that's exactly what you need to do. Third, respect goes both ways. Just because someone agrees to be your guest doesn't mean they've agreed to be your punching bag. Fourth, apologies only matter if they're genuine. Stephen's attempt to smooth things over fell flat because Harrison could tell it wasn't sincere. And fifth, your actions define you. Stephen will be remembered for this moment, for how he treated Harrison, for how he responded when called out. That's his choice and his consequence. Harrison will be remembered for standing his ground, for not compromising his dignity, for showing everyone watching what real strength looks like. Those are the lessons. Those are the takeaways. And those are the reasons this moment matters. It's not just about one interview gone wrong. It's about how we treat each other. It's about respecting people regardless of their position. It's about understanding that fame and success don't give you the right to be cruel. These are fundamental human values, and Harrison Ford reminded us all of them that night. He didn't need to give a speech. He didn't need to explain himself at length. He just stood up, said his piece, and left. Sometimes, that's all you need to do. Sometimes, the most powerful statement is knowing when to walk away. And Harrison Ford mastered that moment. He turned what could have been a humiliating experience into a defining moment of dignity. He took control when someone else tried to control him. He refused to play a game he didn't agree to play. That's mastery. That's wisdom. That's what happens when you've lived long enough and accomplished enough to know exactly who you are and what you stand for. Stephen Colbert learned something that night, whether he admits it or not. He learned that not everyone will tolerate his behavior. He learned that some people value their self-respect more than publicity. He learned that you can't always smooth things over with a joke and a smile. He learned that actions have consequences. And the consequence of disrespecting Harrison Ford was watching him walk off the stage. That's a consequence that played out in front of millions of people. That's a consequence that will follow him. And that's exactly the consequence he deserved. Because if you're going to treat people poorly, you need to be prepared for them to respond. And sometimes, that response is them deciding you're not worth their time. Harrison Ford decided Stephen Colbert wasn't worth his time that night. And honestly, can you blame him? After being insulted, mocked, and dismissed, why would he stay? What would be the point? To give Stephen more opportunities to make jokes at his expense? To sit there and smile while being torn down? No thanks. Harrison chose differently. He chose himself. And in doing so, he reminded all of us that we have that choice too. We don't have to stay in situations where we're not respected. We don't have to tolerate behavior that diminishes us. We don't have to play along when someone treats us poorly. We can stand up. We can speak our truth. We can walk away. And that's exactly what Harrison Ford did. He stood up for himself in the most public way possible. And he did it with grace, with clarity, and with absolute conviction. That's the kind of moment that defines careers. Not the roles you play, not the awards you win, but the moments when you show who you really are under pressure. And Harrison Ford showed us exactly who he is. A man of integrity, a man of principle, a man who knows his worth and refuses to let anyone diminish it. That's who walked off that stage. That's who Stephen Colbert disrespected. And that's who put him in his place without raising his voice, without losing his composure, without stooping to his level. Harrison Ford simply stood up, said what needed to be said, and left. And in doing so, he won. Not because he got the last word, not because he made Stephen look bad, but because he maintained his dignity in a situation designed to strip it away. That's victory. That's strength. That's what real power looks like. And Stephen Colbert got to witness it firsthand. The question now is what happens next? Will Stephen learn from this? Will he change his approach? Will he treat future guests with more respect? Or will he continue down the same path, thinking he can say whatever he wants without consequences? Time will tell, but one thing is certain, Harrison Ford taught him a lesson that night. Whether he learned it or not is up to him, but the lesson was taught, and everyone watching learned it too. We learned that you don't have to tolerate disrespect. We learned that standing up for yourself is always the right choice. We learned that dignity matters more than publicity, and we learned that Harrison Ford is exactly who we always thought he was. A legend. In every sense of the word. So drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Was Harrison right to walk off? Did Stephen cross the line? How would you have handled this situation? We want to hear from you. And make sure you're subscribed because we're bringing you more stories like this. More moments where the cameras captured what really happened. More truth about what goes on behind the scenes in Hollywood. This is just the beginning. Stay tuned.